Jeroboam's religion. Now this is interesting. Now Horn uses the term apostate, and we may see through his discussion a glimpse of the pre-reform religion that the Deuteronomists altered and then they condemned. For political reasons, Jeroboam introduced religious rites and practices in Israel that drastically departed from the worship of an invisible God, Yahweh. In the Council of the Gods, Yahweh wasn't invisible, you see. Lehi's vision. The Deuteronomists said, no one sees God. The pre-reform religion of Israel that Lehi tapped into says, of course we see God. We see God surrounded by numberless concourses of angels. We see God, we see his throne high in the heavens, and so on and so forth. See how that works? That's interesting. At Bethel and Dan, now again this is way up north by the Sea of Galilee there, at opposite ends of the kingdom, he built temples or open-air sanctuaries in competition with the Judahite temple in Jerusalem. At Bethel and Dan, Jeroboam set up images of young bulls to represent Yahweh in visible form. That's 1 Kings 12, 27 through 31. Isn't this interesting that they did build other temples besides Jerusalem? Now, after Josiah reformed the religion, he said only the temple is allowed at Jerusalem. This is another indication that Nephi and Lehi disagreed with that, because the first thing he does when he gets to the New World, he builds a new temple. The Jews who escaped down south, down into Elephantine, one of the first things they do is they build a new temple down in Egypt. So this theme of only the temple at Jerusalem, this came after Josiah reformed the religion and told everyone else that they were the apostates. The only true temple was in Jerusalem. But that wasn't necessarily so. We now know Jews of all areas and places built temples. So did other Israelites. So Nephi is exactly in line with this. Very interesting how that works. And then he sets up a bull as an image, although some interpret the bulls as pedestals on which the invisible Yahweh stood. For 2 centuries, now we're talking 200 years, 2 centuries, this isn't just a couple of decades here, the worship of these golden calves were known as the sin of Jeroboam. Except for 3 of his successors, all of the kings of Israel followed Jeroboam in this aberration. See, it's difficult to see Jeroboam without looking through Deuteronomist lenses, Gardner says, since their historical version is the one that triumphed, and that's the one we read in the Old Testament. But that's only their view. If we had the other records of the northern 10 tribes of Israel, we will see something different. And Nephi prophesies those will come about. That's in 2 Nephi chapter 28 and 29. The words of the Jews shall be had with the words of the Gentiles, and the Gentiles will have the words of the Jews and the lost tribes of Israel, and so on and so forth. Can't wait to get those records. It'll set our Bible records straight, won't it? So, the important point is that Jeroboam established temples other than the one in Jerusalem. Well, a second point was the tie-in between the bull and Yahweh. Now this is significant, because Frank Moore Cross says, in the Ugaritic hymns, there is an early understanding in which the bull is frequently used in epithets for the Father God, El, who sits at the head of the council in heaven. And that is what Lehi saw. So there's some interesting tie-ins with this pre-reform religion in our Book of Mormon that Joseph Smith could not have put in had he simply stolen it from the Bible, because in Joseph Smith's day, by that time, the Bible had been long ago rewritten. To simply copy it would have been a gross error. Joseph Smith didn't do that. He puts in other items of the pre-reform religion that was lost. That's fascinating to behold. Yes, even though the Ugaritic texts, the Canaanitish texts, archaeological discovered texts, there are important parallels to Israel's religion. They can help us understand traces of similar beliefs that remain in our biblical text, although they have been largely rewritten. The King James translates the bull of Jacob as the God of Jacob, though the Hebrew text clearly has the bull of Jacob. This suggests the reasons that Jeroboam, and before him Aaron, might have seen a bull as a fitting representation of God. The Hebrew religion was never static. I'm on page 88 of Gardner now. And the emphasis, El eventually disappeared from sight, and Yahweh took over this incredible, interesting pantheon of the gods, the council of the gods, Yahweh Sabaoth, the hosts of heaven. If you would trust in Yahweh and not fear the arm of the flesh, if you would pray for the strength of the Lord, he would come and fight your battles for him. Now this is another huge Book of Mormon thing. As you read through the Book of Mormon, you'll see this brought out time and time again. Don't fear the Lamanites. Don't fear your enemies. Trust in the Lord. Pray for his strength. By then it had become Yahweh, which emphasis the Book of Mormon properly puts. Very interesting. They talk about Yahweh as the Messiah. Well, Lehi's theology is harmonious with the pre-reform religion characteristic of Jeroboam's kingdom. Given as well his firm preaching that the Messiah was the atoning Redeemer, it seems clear that Lehi had a different understanding of ritual space than did King Josiah and the Deuteronomists. As a result, Lehi built his altar, not only to express thanksgiving, but also because he did not accept restriction to a single temple as binding. Nephi also builds a temple in the New World, 2 Nephi 5 and 16. That's on page 89. And then he's got some other information that I want to talk about on what's this idea? Where did Lehi get his idea of the priesthood? Where did Lehi get his authority to sacrifice? He wasn't a Levite. This is something critics bring up a lot too. Gardner's answer is beautiful. Now I think one of the really nice parts about Gardner's commentary is his ability to bring examples from other areas illustrating precepts out of the Book of Mormon. I love how he does this. This is one of my favorite parts of his commentary so far. All of it's good. Oh man. Page 89 in Volume 1 on the Second Witness. The next point of interest in Lehi's Thanksgiving ceremony is that he traced his genealogy through Joseph, not through Levi. Now, we know in the Old Testament, all of those of us who have bothered to study the Old Testament realize that the Levites were set aside to perform the sacrifices for ancient Israel. But Lehi traces his genealogy through Joseph. Lehi is not a Levite. Lehi is from Manasseh. So he's not one of the line of priests authorized to offer sacrifices, yet we see Lehi offering sacrifices. Why is that? How is that? How could Lehi make acceptable sacrifices? I mean, anybody can sacrifice, that's not the problem. Cain and Abel, Yeah.